At the Paris Olympics, one sport is being introduced that have a lot of. Oh, I'll start that again. That was shit. Hang on. All right. At the Paris Olympics, one sport is set to be added, which has a lot of people talking. For the very first time at an Olympic Games, a dance sport has been added, and that sport is breaking. It could be known as breakdancing by a lot of people out there, and we are very excited to see it. And today I am so excited to learn more about the sport by Australia's #1 ranked male breaker. And I am so thrilled to find out more about the journey into the sport, what we are to expect in Paris, and everything else in between. And it's not often that I introduce guests on this show that have two names. I will first of all introduce him by, I guess, his non-breaking name, and that, of course, is Gerard Cabellon. And if you want to go by his breaking name, it's B-Boy Kid Tek. So, Gerard, first of all, welcome off the podium. And Gerard Kid Tek, what am I calling you here for the next hour or so?
Gerard's cool. You can just
Gerard's cool. All right,
Gerard's
cool. All right, I felt how the Kid Tek would kind of go along the way, but I'll stick with Gerard, so that kind of works. But
if you want to switch it up, it's up to you. But
yeah,
Gerard
why not?
Kind of all right.
Every 5 minutes, we'll just flick it in, doing it. It's like a showdown, right? Kind of just change it up all the time. But I mean, as I mentioned there, first time a dance sport has been ever introduced to the Olympics, but breaking, which is fascinating. I remember when this was announced, and I was like, wow, that was completely left field. Never expected to see breakdancing at an Olympic Games. So for yourself, I mean, how long have you been involved in breaking, and kind of how do you get involved in this sport?
Yeah, well, I've been breaking for around 11 years. And I would say for maybe 10 of those 11 years, I would have never thought that I would say a sport. That whole time, for me, it's always been an art form or a dance. So this whole idea of like breaking as a sport is pretty new for a lot of the people in the community. Or maybe not new, but it's always been a debate. But for it to be kind of accepted as a sport now because of the Olympics, that's pretty surreal, very different. But yeah, to answer your question, like getting into it is, it's just like kind of getting into anything else, like any other sport. You see it on TV, or for me, it was specifically So You Think You Can Dance, or, Australia's Got Talent, and seeing the breakers on that. I remember seeing, B-Boy Don and B-Boy Louie and another group of Sydney breakers doing it on one of those shows when I was like maybe 4 or 5 years old. I don't even know. And I remember running to my mum's room and like trying some moves on the floor and just always having it in my mind of like, wow, this is so cool. Like I want to learn this. And then, go forward a few years, I was dancing a little bit in high school, and, a few of the guys who I danced with kind of got in like a bit of trouble. They were a little bit of like, maybe not the best influences. So I kind of detached myself from that. And then I was like, damn, I want to dance, but that style that I was doing is too affiliated with these people. So I'm like, you know what, I'm going to try breaking. And then I did that, and I kind of just kept going, man.
And that's a history.
That's pretty much the story for a lot of people. They just see it on TV, they try it on their own, and then they find little communities to do it with.
Yeah, which, I mean, it's just a unique aspect, kind of going back to what you're saying about how even it being considered as a sport, because, I mean, when I was in high school, I knew a lot of my friends did dancing, and it was never a case of they were going to, sporting competitions and stuff. There was some level of competition, but a lot of it was more just it was a recreational activity. It was a bit of fun. They never did it to compete, which I guess that development of it throughout the years that I'm sure you would have seen to where it's at now. I mean, when you were getting involved in it in that aspect, was it just a recreational thing, or were sort of competitions and things like that being held at the time that you could go in and represent your club or your state or anything along those lines?
Not so much on club or state level. It's the reason why I think breaking is even in the Olympics is because it's such a battle and competition-oriented dance. It's not like, let's say, ballet or contemporary, where it's very much performative or personal. From the kind of, creation of breaking, it's always been kind of about exchanging or battling.
Mm.
So, it's not, like you said, it's not really part of clubs, but we do represent ourselves as individuals and our character. So let's say me, B-Boy Kid Tek, and very much so our crews. So there are breaking crews who kind of band together from either the same area or, just experience or age group. And then we kind of battle it out like that. So crew versus crew, 1v1, sometimes 2v2, 3v3. There's a whole bunch of different formats for breaking competitions. And, just like any other comp, it's like a bracket, top 16, top 8, semifinals, finals. So you can kind of think of it as, a knockout tournament that's somewhat like, I don't know, UFC. There's 3 rounds per battle, right? 1 round, 2 round, bam, bam, bam. And then whoever wins, judges will point to them, move on to the next round, move on to the next round. And then, yeah. So it's very much been, the structure of it has always been pretty solid for an event like the Olympics, I feel.
Which I loved watching in the lead up to this, some of the competitions, some of your competitions, some of the Youth Olympics competitions and things like that, because when I was reading about it before I watched it, seeing that battle aspect kind of come to fruition from what I was reading about is fascinating, because it's sort of, it's almost like when you see, the epic rap battles, throw it down, except, instead of a rap, you're doing with the dance, because you've got the great dance moves, the showmanship, and then kind of as you're staring down the other competitor, you're kind of doing hand gestures towards them, like, oh, come on, is that all you've got? Which, I mean, it adds such an element to it. So I can see what you're saying with that battle element, why the Olympics probably, looked at it and went, hey, like this would be great for many people to watch and see, and obviously the athletes to compete in.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, I feel especially with, battle tactics, that in itself, you can study that. There's so much kind of psychology and philosophy behind battling. There's a lot of intricacy and details when it comes to judging. There's so much to be, the criteria of what makes a good breaker or what makes a good round in a battle is, that there's no formula to win, but there's a lot of categories that kind of need to be met and a wide range of skills that need to be learned in order to be good at breaking. So I just think, it's natural, I feel, for something like this to come. It's just a matter of time, yeah.
Were you sort of, before you got into breaking, were you involved in sports? Did you play sports as a kid? Do other sort of forms of dance? I mean, kind of, growing up, were there those other elements that you sort of kept yourself busy with?
Yeah, when I was growing up, I played basketball mainly. When I was, maybe primary school age, played a lot of basketball, moved over to playing soccer. I played on kind of small club levels. I still kind of play now just for fun, recreationally. So, the competition aspect of my life has always been pretty important. Winning has always been kind of important to me. And I feel it translates really well to breaking. It just so happens to be, it's also an art form. So I get kind of like on one hand, my creative release and my personal, I guess, emotional release in the art form sense. And I also get like my competitive release, like the need to be like, yeah, I'm fucking better than you. Or, I messed up that time. I'm going to go back and fix it up. Yeah, so it's a nice duality there, which clashes a lot sometimes, especially on a personal level, like not knowing, what to value. Because sometimes the competition side gets out of hand and then you kind of lose yourself. Other times you're really into it on an emotional, personal, even spiritual level, but then you're not really doing well in competitions. So there's a really fine line between, doing both and expressing yourself while at the same time doing well in comps, which makes breaking just crazy. To me, it's like coolest art form there is.
Did you, through basketball, soccer, or anything, did you ever look at the Olympics as something that, wanted to strive towards? I mean, was it something that you watched sort of growing up when, they were on every 4 years or every 2 years, I guess, if you classify, watching the winter and the summer every couple of years?
Nah. Like I watched it, but I never, bro, like I'm a Filipino short guy. No, I'm not thinking like I'm going to be in the Olympics for basketball, and I started soccer at like you know, 16 years old. That's like, there's like 16-year-olds in the Olympics already. So
Yeah.
I was like, that was not a thing for me. And at the same time, I was breaking, but I did not think Olympics would be a thing for breaking either. So
Yeah.
this whole thing, just even coming around now, is just a whole kind of, emotional whirlwind of excitement and uncertainty. But, it's cool, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I mean, we'll obviously sort of talk a little bit about how that process works in getting to Paris. But I would love to learn more about the sport. I mentioned to you off air that this interview was going to cover a lot of the, hey, what is breaking? How does it work? We want to learn this. I do. Our listeners, our viewers, everybody wants to learn. Can you break it down, no pun intended, for us? Because I'm reading here, top rock, down rock, and freeze, the basic elements that make up breaking. Now, how would you describe those three? Because I'm reading those and I feel like I'm playing a game of Pokemon and they're just kind of battle moves or something like that. So enlighten us here, Gerard. How does all that work?
Okay, well, enlightenment time. So I would say, okay, first of all, I'd say the term sport itself is pretty loose with breaking. I personally don't know if I'm completely comfortable with just saying it's a sport. So maybe that's just one thing to keep in mind, is just, calling it a dance or an art form or a craft. Maybe is how it is at the moment, could change, but that's just how I see it. And that's just for whoever's listening to this, that's kind of where it's at the moment. It's not necessarily taken as a sport just yet by the general, population of breakers. But now into those categories that you mentioned, top rock, down rock, and freeze, they are correct. However, there are different names for those things, and there's maybe one extra element that's not included there. So you have top rock, which is what you do while standing on your feet. So if you see when people usually come into a battle round, they'll walk in from their side into the middle. They'll kind of, groove to the music. It's very step-based, musicality-based, where they're, riding every second beat of the song while standing. Down rock or footwork is when your hands and feet are on the ground together. So kind of in like a crouched position. Right. And that's when your legs are kind of spinning around, flying around while you're still elevated by your arms. Freezes are any time that you pause within the round to accentuate the music. So you can freeze while, even this is like a freeze basically. If I stood up like that, that's technically a freeze. But I guess what more people associate with freezes are, when you're just frozen upside down or balancing on one arm. That's freeze. And I would say
is it the head as well? Like when you're on your head, is that a freeze?
Head, shoulder, arm. Some people do freezes on like, I don't know, their nose, whatever. Literally anything, as long as you're just frozen, right?
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know who does that, but yeah, I'm just trying to say you can do freezes. Like
you can be doing it at the Olympics. Come on, Gerard. There you go.
I'll start.
Work on that.
But yeah, the one more thing I would add to that is power moves.
Right.
So that's kind of what a lot of people associate with breaking. So things like windmills where you're on your back, or back spins or head spins, that would be in the category of power moves. So you could go, the general structure of a breaking round from beginning to end would be top rock, footwork or down rock, then into power moves, and then into a freeze. That is like the basic way of creating or structuring a round in breaking, competitions or ciphering.
And is it a strategy-based sort of formula that you're working out going into each battle, in the fact that, say, if I was to get a sport like diving, you go into a qualifying round doing a certain dive, then the more you progress, the harder dives you're going to be doing. So are you going to be going into round one with certain moves, and then kind of each round you turn it up essentially and go, all right, come on, let's make this more interesting?
So I would say to an extent what you described is correct, but it's more based on your opponent rather than the rounds. So, breaking is very much a call and response type of art form. So what we do a lot of the time is, and this is also part of the art of battling when it comes to breaking, is responding to your opponent. So let's say my opponent does a, backspin. I'm going to be like, okay, he did a backspin. What can I do that's better than that, or that can respond to that and take it up a notch? So I might do a backspin into a head spin into a freeze.
Wow.
So that's kind of how you can bring in the battle, element into it. But, also naturally there are, like, let's say you have a 3-round competition or a 3-round battle. Maybe you want your first round to show your style or show how much, character and musicality you have, and maybe emphasize on that. Second round, you keep it solid, you do a little bit of everything. And maybe on your last round, you do something very memorable, something explosive. So you can structure it like that, but I would say it's more so about following the music, whatever the music is telling you to do, as well as following your opponent.
So it's very open-ended. It's very free-flowing. Creativity is a must, it seems, and the fact that you go in there with any strategy you want, but if your opponent all of a sudden does exactly what you're saying, okay, well, I've got to up it up. And thinking on your feet, I can imagine, because you've only got, 60 seconds per round to kind of throw it down. Is that correct?
There's no time limit usually. The average duration that a breaker would do a round would be, 40 seconds to maybe 100 seconds
Right.
max. 60 seconds would be, especially for Olympic level competitions, 60 seconds would probably be an average.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, it's fascinating to think that you could, sort of have that level where you could kind of do that, because the judging, I mean, being a judge sport as well, it's sort of, I could be, I imagine, dependent on the judges. I mean, are they always sort of looking for the same thing? Like, I'm sure there's a criteria which they're judging you on, but I mean, can it differ at different competitions?
Oh, different competitions for sure. There are a few different judging systems out there. So even now, I believe they may have confirmed the judging system for the Olympics, but that's something that, at least on our end in Australia, we still have to have a little bit more clarity on. But, traditionally speaking, judges go by round systems. So round per round. So let's say I go first, you go second.
Mm-hmm.
They'll basically just judge who won out of those 2 rounds.
Right.
And to determine who won, they look at different elements like, okay, musicality, who was on the music more, musicality, maybe dynamics, who kind of used more space and used more levels. They can also judge on execution, who was cleaner, who kind of flowed in and out of their moves without crashing or disrupting their flow. You have battling, who kind of had the battle energy, making eye contact, getting the crowd involved, responding to moves. There's a whole bunch of, separate subcategories, I guess, to battling that judges are looking for. And like you said, it's only 60 seconds. So, within that time frame, they kind of, a lot is going through their mind. They're looking for a lot of things. So that's why, with that round by round system, you do have moments where people don't agree with the judges, or people don't even compete because they're like, oh, I don't think these judges will appreciate what I do, so I'm not going to compete. So I guess the point of the Olympics and the system that they adopt will be to have, so that they have the most transparency. So, maybe like a system that is based on points and also catering to all of those elements, like I stated above, which there are more, but, all of the elements that are involved in a battle, so that I think they are going to have a number system so that you can look back on your score by the end.
Which, like, I mean, yeah. Well, I'm reading on the Olympics website, they've got sort of a rundown with it, and at least what they've got now at the time of recording this, it says, a minimum of 3 or more uneven number of judges score the battles on 6 criteria, which you were obviously touching on there: creativity, personality, technique, variety, performativity, and musicality. With performativity, that's a very interesting word, and creativity consisting of 60%, while the other ones make up 40% of the score. So, and they said at the Youth Olympics in 2018 that comprised of 5 judges, basically. Which, I mean, what you're saying there, like, you think of all the judge sports at the Olympics, and they've got a pretty strict, I guess, scoring system. You think of gymnastics, figure skating; they're obviously looking for those certain elements that athletes have to meet. But it just seems like there's such more of an open-ended scale there, which, I mean, that sounds very fascinating. That makes it a little bit more exciting, if you ask me.
Well, yeah. Well, like I said before, it's an art form first, right?
Yeah.
if there's a painting competition, right? How do you judge what painting is better than the next? Because at the end of the day, it's self-expression, right? So, if I resonate more with one work and not necessarily with another, however, everyone else thinks that one's better, who's right and who's wrong? And I think that's why you have this vague, interpretation of breaking when it comes to judging, is because at the end of the day, you can't really fight against your bias of what you think is more important. So some people may really highly value musicality, whereas other people may value technique more, So that's where that vagueness comes in. Because it's not like, let's say, Taekwondo, where you can just tick a box or like score 1 point for every time this happens.
Yeah.
And, it's more, I guess up to personal interpretation.
Which, I mean, the closest sport I can think of at an Olympics would probably be figure skating, just in terms of what sort of they do. But, I mean, it is interesting to think that there's never been a dance sport at the Olympics. I'm pretty sure ballroom dancing has often been talked of as a potential Olympic sport, kind of the figure skating on land without ice, so to speak. But, yeah, I think that this is obviously a great move by the IOC, given the youth angle of it, kind of appealing to the younger audiences. Because, again, watching some of the battles and the footage of this, it's just the energy of you competing, the energy of the crowd, your DJ kind of flaring up the crowd as well, the music as well. I mean, it seems like it would be a very fun venue to be in, watching all of this live.
Yeah, man. It's, on one hand, you have a music concert where a live DJ is playing songs, and you have dancing there as well. And the dancing isn't necessarily all choreographed or planned out. It's very spontaneous. So you can very much feel the energy of who competes. And also who's competing can feel the energy of the crowd. So that's what's very interesting for me about breaking. It's very much a give and take.
When it comes to the music side of things, obviously you mentioned the musicality, and obviously I'm not sure if this has been established what it will be for the Olympics, but where does that choice come from? Do you choose that? Because you're in a battle, so I can't imagine that one person's going to choose it over the other. Is that kind of given to you by the competition, and you're told in advance this is the song you're going to be dancing to, and you just kind of work with that?
So you do not know what music is going to play when you go out.
Wow.
So what happens is the DJ has songs that they choose, that they think is appropriate for a final battle, or that they think is appropriate for a preliminary battle. And they will play those tracks. All the tracks do follow a similar BPM and have a similar structure. So let's say, every time it hits the 1 count, something will happen. Maybe just like a big clap. So even though the songs are different, you're still able to adapt to them quite easily. However, naturally, every song has a different melody or has different instruments being played. So that means you move differently depending on the song. But since you don't know what song is going to be played, you kind of have to adapt to that.
Wow. Fascinating. That's really fascinating. Which, again, I guess the DJ themselves, I mean, that sounds like there's a selection criteria alone for the DJ, because I'm sure there's a bit of strategy involved there in terms of like, well, this DJ is going to do this, or they've got their own style. So, I mean, again, probably not at the time of recording this, knowing how it will all work for the Olympics. But I mean, how do they go about choosing a DJ?
Well, I guess, okay, so there are DJs who are famous for just breaking battles, or a break DJ. That's very common. So it's not like we can just go online and type in best DJs in Sydney and choose one. It's specifically people who specialize in this. And obviously it's breaking it in itself is so niche, let alone being a break DJ. So there's only really a handful of them in Sydney. So between those guys and females, you just ask, can you do this event? Can you do that event? And I guess what I should also say is there's not an infinite amount of breaking tracks. So even though you don't know what song is going to be played, there's a high chance that you would have at least heard that song before. So it's not like you're completely in the dark with this. You do end up, it's not a surprise if I do a battle and I know or at least I've heard every song that I battle to. Yeah.
So does that then come to a point where you maybe have like a favorite or someone that you kind of grab and you're training to a lot, and all of a sudden in a competition, like, oh yeah, great, this track, this is my jam, and then all of a sudden you'll have ones where you're like, oh fuck, not this one. Jesus, I always suck at doing this one.
Oh, dude, always. There are always battles where, they play a song and, you can't ask to change the song, or you can't just not go in. And I'm just like, fuck, I hate this song. That happens at maybe every jam at least once, Wow. So you just kind of go in and you do it, you try your best, but it's very much a preference thing. It's not like every song evokes the same feeling. Some songs can be super hype. Other songs rely on you to be a little bit more, maybe slick and smooth with your movement. Or other songs really want you to go hard and hit, certain sounds. And again, like I said before, a huge part of what we do is the music. So it's not like we are, well, at least ideally, but it's not like we are just doing our moves and doing them on top of the music. So if this is the music, it's not like we're just doing our moves on top. The idea is the music is here and we are kind of crossing into it. So we are merging ourselves with the music and adapting to it.
I love hearing that, merging into the music. That's a great way of putting it, because, we often find from a lot of our guests on the show that they'll have the headphones on before whatever event they're going in, because that's pumping them up, and often some sports like Winter Olympics, half pipe, they've got the headphones still on when they're competing. But this is obviously a sport where you're not probably going to do that beforehand, because you need that music as part of your routine, your competition, to kind of get there. Because, that merging into it, that's a great way of describing it. That's a real great image there.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like if anything, before competitions, I usually don't listen to breaking tracks. I'll listen to guys like maybe, I don't know, John Coltrane, or like some experimental jazz, or maybe just classical music, to just put me in a completely different headspace.
Yeah.
So that way when I hear the breaking track, it's kind of fresh for me, or it's new. So I do end up feeling that excitement. Because like I said before, you hear a lot of the tracks, like you would have heard them throughout your 10 years of breaking. So a lot of the time you do get bored of certain songs. And for it to feel brand new to you again, maybe you limit yourself on listening to the same song over and over and over and over again.
Yeah,
I can maybe imagine. The opposite of other people, where they're trying to get hype. I'm trying to get, trying to chill. Because I know that music
I guess you can't really break to classical music. There's not really a beat to it, right? I mean, I don't know if you've ever tried. It probably doesn't work, really, does it?
Maybe not, not ideal.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't quite
best. Yeah.
Work that way. When it comes to, like, the thing also too that I love about it, your name, B-Boy Kid Tek, like, how do you come up with that? Is that something that you pick from when you first start, or does it get given to you? I mean, how do all these cool names that we see all of the dancers having come about?
Yeah, I guess, well, traditionally, you have your name given to you.
Right.
So in my case, when I was in my first year of breaking, I would practice with, a bunch of people. And one of my crewmates, he gave me that name. It was like Kid Tek. Before that, I guess the name itself is usually based on, characteristics of you or characteristics of your dance. So for me, I was always the youngest guy in the group. So that's where the kid aspect comes in. And Tek is based more on my breaking style. So technical, quite a technician when it comes to how I construct my moves. And the term Tek is what we use for a small combo. So I guess back then I would make a lot of intricate combinations with my moves. And you could say I had a very Tek-based style. And I was also just quite technical with how I did things. So Tek was just, came natural as well. So Kid Tek was just how I appealed to other people at that time. Some people do choose their name though, but I think it's cooler when it gets given to you.
Yeah, I can imagine. And is it sort of something then that, I can't imagine anybody would really change it along the way, right? It's not like, fuck, I've been doing shit as Kid Tek, so let's call myself, juvenile Tek, or I've grown up now, I'm adult Tek. Like, I mean, I don't know if that probably happens too much in breaking.
No, not really. I do get that a lot though. When are you going to become adult Tek or adolescent Tek or whatever, but, for me, I did consider changing my name, actually. I considered changing my name maybe 2 years ago, because I came from quite a long hiatus from breaking. and I wanted to kind of, reinvigorate myself. And I was like, you know what, mate, I'm going to change my identity. I'm going to pick a new name. I'm going to start fresh, and then I'm just going to make a bang. But, reflecting back on what that name really means to me, Kid Tek, I mean, I was like, no, this is me. This is who I am. It's been given to me. It's kind of sacred for me. So I just kept it. And I think being a kid is very much like that's a really important part of not just breaking, but hip hop in general, kind of like feeding the inner child, allowing that inner child to play and, being free and being, expressive and random and being childlike. For me, that's a very, very big part of breaking. At the end of the day, we just want to be, kids again.
Yeah.
That's like the epitome of freedom, the epitome of creativity. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I will gladly be Kid Tek when I'm 70 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
keep that going there. You mentioned obviously that style, sort of, more of a technical style for yourself. But I mean, what other sort of styles can you have as a breaker?
Yes. So my style is yeah, like I said, a technical style that's based mainly on footwork. So like we were talking about before, it's when you go down on your hands and your feet at the same time, kind of like quick feet, abstract angles, patterns, and, flowy combinations. You do have people who specialize in freezes. So they go from, their head to their elbow, to their hands, down to their arm, and they just kind of, their rhythm is a little bit more like stack, 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 stack. Whereas my rhythm is a little bit more, I guess, unpredictable and fast. You do have people who specialize in power moves. So they're constantly spinning, 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 upside down, spinning on their head, throwing themselves around. I guess there are people who specialize in those aspects, such as top rock, footwork, freezes, and power. But I guess the way that things are moving now, especially that the Olympics are coming, people are trying to have a little bit more of an all-rounded style. So they do a little bit of everything. They do, they start off doing some intricate footwork, do a big power move, and then finish with some freeze combination. So that's something that's way more prevalent now than it was maybe 10 years ago, where it was more catered to specialists. But now it's, everything is kind of merging into one. And what really shines now is your character and personality above just your choice of moves.
Which I loved, again, in the footage that I watched, I loved seeing just that level of personality that is come across. And you and I were talking a little bit off air about sort of, what the next couple of years are no doubt going to be like for breaking and the attention it's going to receive. And I can't imagine this isn't going to just be the biggest thing in Paris. We saw that with skateboarding and things like that in Tokyo, which, had differing levels of success. But for, in a modern age, social media, things like that, personality, it's going to be huge. I can't see this not being huge in at Paris.
Well, I've been saying that I think it's going to be huge. And I've been saying that for like 10 years, like we have character, we can do these big moves, we have personality, we can kind of, I feel like if people put a camera on us, we're going to do something crazy no matter what. And I hope that leads into opportunities in like commercials, in movies, whatever, interviews like this. But for me, breakers, you have to be a bit of a crazy person to want to do breaking, to want to do it for 10 years. So naturally you get a lot of interesting people in there.
Which, when it comes to the training, I mean, the obvious thing is I'm sure you're probably dancing every single day, honing on the moves. But is there an element where, say, going to the gym, going for a run, something along those lines, watching your diet? I mean, is there a lot more to it than simply just dancing every single day?
Yeah, for sure. Just like any other sport, you have to manage your life properly. You have to get sleep. You have to take on extra exercise, like you said, running or, doing push-ups and planks every day, for example. Diet is a big part for me. I think that, if you think about it, you're carrying yourself a lot of the time. The lighter you are, the easier it's going to be. So, making sure you're within a certain range that's manageable for you while you still can be strong. If you think of calisthenics, for example, pretty similar, where you're strengthening yourself while also, increasing mobility. Stretching is a big part of it. We're constantly stretching, constantly trying to get splits, constantly trying to like get our shoulder as far back as we can. It's really a full body exercise. There isn't a part of your body that isn't used when you break. So I guess you have to be in shape to do it at a competitive level.
Yeah. And I can imagine it's the only Olympic sport where actually sitting or standing on your head is the only element there to practice, because I don't think you're seeing weightlifters or all these other athletes, having to hang on their head for a little bit too.
Yeah,
Which
I
is
guess
that
maybe not
scary when you do that for the first time? When you all of a sudden try out the whole like the head spin or getting on your
Give
head?
it a go, mate. Give it a go.
Oh,
Tell me.
right now you want me to try it? I'll probably end up breaking my
on your
neck. That'd be something that
yeah,
nobody wants to see today. Trust me.
Yeah, it can be scary, I guess. Looking back on it, like now it's not. Like, some people jump from standing and land on their head. That's a thing. But I do teach a lot more now, so I do see more of the, younger generation or people who don't have experience, and they do have a lot of fear going upside down. But again, similar to skateboarding, there is an element of fearlessness that you have to have in order to be good. So a lot of the time you just have to, just think positive. Don't think you're going to break your neck, and just give it a go and just be careful. And then that's how you kind of get good. I feel like if you're too cautious, you limit yourself.
Which I would say my biggest fear wouldn't necessarily be being on the head or upside down. I just hate being spun around, Gerard. It's not a thing that I like. So I'd be doing one bloody spin. I'm like, nah, quit. I'm done. I'll just, go onto my arms or something like that, because I just hate being dizzy,
Yeah. No, it's, you kind of got to get used to being dizzy if you want to break.
Yeah. Yeah. Which do you kind of, I mean, again, it's probably a question you can't answer because as you're saying, it's more of a creativity thing. You're not going in, no doubt, with a certain way of looking at it. But if you are going to plan for the big head spin, would you generally go towards the end of a round or a routine because you don't want to start off by spinning around being super dizzy and then kind of going into some other moves? Or is there a way you kind of combat that?
Oh, man, there are just some crazy kids out there who will just head spin the whole way through.
Wow.
There are some breakers who specialize specifically on head spins,
Jeez.
And they will go from spinning fast, spinning slow, to spinning with their hands behind their back, to spinning with their legs crossed together. And they will just do that for like 40 seconds straight, and then get up and walk off like nothing
Cross
happened.
their arms, beat that. And how do you combat that though? Is that like the ultimate score you can get in breaking, or is there like a move you go, oh fuck, you're just spinning on your head, mate, I can do better than that, come on?
No, I guess that's a thing where that's what I'm interested to see in the Olympics, because obviously the general public would find that to be absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, this guy just spun on his head. But for people who can do that move, or people who specialize in head spins, they can all do that. Once you get into the top tier of breaking, those moves that may seem super flashy aren't actually that difficult. I'm not saying I can do that, but a lot of people can. So then on a judging level, they're like, yeah, I've seen that before. I can do that. So there's nothing too crazy about it. But let's say for someone like my style, who's more about creating angles and shapes and on the floor and going to the music really well, maybe that's a bit more refreshing for the judges. Like, oh, he did something with his legs that I've never seen. So I will give him a point, as opposed to just the guy who spun on his head for 30 seconds because he just did one move.
Yeah.
And maybe someone else did 20 in one go.
Lazy. One move. Lazy. Gerard, come on.
Oh, look, that's crazy. If I could do it, I'll do it. But there's more to breaking than just the flashy move, is what I'm trying to say.
And it really does seem like a sport that it's endless in terms of the fact that, again, at aerial skiing, you can probably only spin 5 times, 100 meters, you can only probably run a certain time. It's never going to, break the 7-second barrier. Whereas breaking, you could be creating moves today that no one's ever seen. There could be a breaker out now, a young girl, a young boy who's going to be doing something in 10 years' time that no one's ever seen. It just seems like an endless amount of ability that you can bring to the table.
No, you're completely right about that. And I think creating, it's insane how you can know breaking and see breaking for 10 years and still see something brand new every time you go out and do it, or every time you watch it. So creativity is a big part of it. You can always do something new. There is always something new to be done, because as the world change, changes, you get inspiration from it, right? So, let's say now that whatever is popular, let's say Star Wars, I'm looking behind you, or, Marvel, they might do something there and you're like, oh, I can turn that into a breaking move, So that will always happen because we do draw influences from a lot of the things that we see outside. But yeah, for me, creativity is one of the most important aspects of breaking. I would put it maybe top 2, top 3. So yeah, man, that's part of the enjoyment of doing it, is being able to create something new every single day. You can surprise yourself and be like, whoa, I didn't know that was possible. And you just did it, it's really fun.
With what you're saying there, what are the other kind of top 2, top 3 most important elements of breaking then?
And I guess this goes to what I said about it's quite vague and everyone has a personal preference. For me, it is very much musicality would be number 1. Then I would go creativity and then character. That's what I would value.
Good 3 there. I mean, I got to ask just on the influence. I mean, please tell me if you've ever been influenced by Star Wars and use that. But I mean, do you sort of, what are you influenced by? Is there certain things that just hit you, or kind of do you go out of your way to watch, listen, read certain things that maybe might influence you?
Yeah, so I guess, I draw influence from, one, the people I'm around. So I have a crew, Floatality, this crew over here.
You got it, yeah, advertising there.
I just always wear this, but
it's nice. I like it. Get the merch going out there. You need to drop it.
One day.
Yeah,
but,
exactly. I'll gladly wear it.
I have a crazy crew full of crazy people. So, and that's not just dance. Like literally, they're fucking crazy. They just do wild shit every day. So just watching them gives me a lot of inspiration. I'm into different types of music. I'll listen to, like for me, I'm very inspired by jazz, or even the structure, or maybe even the seemingly lack of structure in jazz. I try to be quite, unpredictable with what I do. I do very much base it on how I hear music. I'm into films. I watch films. There are certain tones that I feel in film that I try to match. I'm actually a film editor. Like that's kind of what I do as my day job. So even just reflecting on that and how contrast and motif is such a big part of it. You go from something dark to something light and there's an impact. So how do you translate that to dance? Maybe I'll do something small and do something big. And now I've just created an emotional response to what I did. But, I wouldn't have known that as well if I didn't have this understanding of film or editing. So, my life definitely is in play every time I dance.
It just seems like, going back to the point, the argument, whatever you want to call it, about, sport, artistic, all that sort of stuff, that, back 100 years ago, there were artistic programs in Olympics. There were gold medals awarded for painting, for theatre, way back in the day. And it almost seems like we're kind of bringing that back with this, because if it's in the Olympics, it's obviously classified as a sport. But like what you're saying there was kind of that level of inspiration, creativity, things like that. I mean, Ian Thorpe isn't watching a movie and going, well, the way the light and the dark translates to each other is going to make me swim an extra, 3 seconds faster in the 400 meters. This is something that you can take on board, and that could potentially be the difference between 7th place and an Olympic gold medal. Like it's insane to think of how that can work into something that is now an Olympic sport.
Yeah. I can be a bit pretentious at times with what I say.
No, please. It's great. I like this. This is what we need to learn about the sport here, Gerard. This is exactly why you've got you on. Be pretentious as you like.
Yeah. Oh, no, but no, seriously. Well, this is what makes breaking so interesting for me, is you have that deep, deep level of artistry, right? And then that alone, you can just imagine that's enough to set you up. If you just worked on creating and exploring all day, every day, that can feed your soul. That's enough to do. However, there's also the aspect where I'm trying to learn moves as well. And the only way to learn moves, or the only way to refine your existing moves, is by drilling them and practicing them. Like doing 100 free throws in basketball. You'll do, 100 windmills, or you'll do 50 flares. You have to still have that element of just grinding and training and being at the gym and, So you can be as creative as you want, but you can't deny the need for a foundational base of movement and a solid foundation of movement. So, it's just so, I guess, fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, it really, really is. And that character element too, that playing up to the crowd, getting them on board, connecting with the music. I mean, I don't know sort of if the venue sort of where they're having it in Paris is going to be announced, but I mean, I can't imagine this isn't going to be one that's going to have a massive, massive crowd. But do you sort of go into these events where the bigger the crowd, the better? Are you sort of somebody who really does feed off that atmosphere and get that character on board to really kind of go into that creativity?
Yeah, personally, I'm a very, I love the crowd. Yeah, a lot of the times when I do big competitions, I peek and I look at all the audience members, and I just think to myself, well, okay, these are like, let's say there's like 500 people here. All right, this is my chance to win 500 people over.
Wow.
To have 500 people be like, oh, I fucking love Kid Tek, every time. Right? So some people be like, don't want that at all, and they're just like, okay, I'm going to focus. I don't want crowds as a distraction, but I guess that feeds me. So the bigger the better, man. Like I enjoy that a lot. And for me, the playing to the crowd, obviously it's fun to watch, but it's also a battle tactic for me. If the crowd's on my side and they're louder for me than they are for you, or I can make them, laugh, and you're just not really, interacting with them, then that's getting in my opponent's head. Like, damn, this guy's like, he's able to battle me and also make these guys have fun. So I need to like step my game up. This is rough. So at the end of the day, I'm always thinking battle. I am always thinking, what can I do to get a leg up on my opponent? And for me, playing to the crowd just happens to be something that I enjoy and also assists me in doing that.
Which I love that battle aspect, because one of my favorite questions I love asking people from new sports is there sledging involved in your sport? Do things get out there on the field, the court, whatever it is? And I mean, this just seems like you live off this type of thing. I've seen the footage of this kind of like the mind games and that sort of stuff, which that just looks fun. You kind of get to diss these people and it's part of the sport and you get away with it.
Yeah, like you get away with it 90% of the time, I'd say. Obviously there are times where it goes too far, or, no touching is a big thing. You don't want to ever lay hands on anyone. But sometimes it escalates, sometimes people get too close, or sometimes, you're maybe mocking someone too hard. But for me, like, man, I don't care. Like, obviously no touching, but I will talk shit. I will try to get in your head. I will laugh at you. I will point at you. I will call it out when you make a mistake. I guess one, it's good for battling, but also, dude, it's just fun. It's fun because there's no hard feelings at the end. It's when in life do you get to just do those things and not be a bully? You know what I mean?
Well, there's one thing I've noticed in all the matches I've watched, the battles, like you guys are all in each other's faces. You're doing this, you're doing that. But at the end of the day, the judges go, boom, Kid Tek's the winner, but the other guy's lost. But you give each other a hug, high five. Yeah, man, that was awesome. Great battle. So it doesn't seem, no matter how much shit talk you're doing out there, you end up giving each other a hug, a handshake, and probably go grab a beer afterwards or something like that.
Yeah, well, that is a huge part of it. But there is also what happens behind the camera, So I guess the way that, well, first of all, breaking it's a way to turn negativity into positivity. That's just how it's been made in its conception. It was made by, African American and Latino youth in the late 70s to combat gang violence, to combat getting into this negative space in life. So what they did was just dance, right? So positivity is at its core, but the way that we kind of let out those negative emotions is by battling each other. So let's say if I talk too much shit to you in a battle, or you feel personally offended by what I did, what would usually happen is a call out. So you would call me out and be like, hey, like, let's go. Let's do some rounds. Like, I'll destroy you. Or like, I will show you that I'm better than you right now. No cameras, no nothing. So that is still very much part of the culture. So you do have, breaking is very much separated into this competitive sphere and I guess, underground sphere. And in the underground sphere, that's where you have ciphers, which are circles of dancers gathered around, kind of just sharing their energy within that space, not always recorded on camera. And then you have the competition where there's a stage, where there's lights, where there's a huge audience. So, some breakers just live here and some breakers just live here. But, for me, I think it's important to dabble or to be connected to all of those parts of breaking.
Because I was going to say, with the positivity that an Olympic appearance for the sport brings, I can imagine the flip side of that is I'm sure there are maybe some traditionalists or, people who don't see this as a sport, as you've sort of mentioned a few times. This is an art form. It's an expression. It's got its roots in what you were saying, sort of in that cultural aspect of rather than fighting, this is going to be expressive there. So I can imagine that there are maybe some breakers who maybe aren't so positive on it being in the Olympics and kind of want to keep it sort of in that maybe underground level of things rather than the competition side of things.
Yeah, that's natural, I think. And there is a lot of that. And there was even more of that, especially when breaking just came around. But I think at least for most people, they've accepted that this is a good opportunity for breakers to achieve more, to maybe make a living out of it, or to at least, make more of an impact with their art form. So I think more people have gone around to it, but you'll always have traditionalists and people who want to keep it raw and underground. But in my opinion, I think that there's space for both.
Yeah.
Similarly to how you have, pro skateboarding and or maybe like, the big TV X Games. Then you have street skateboarding, which are like independent brands and independent people who are just filming their own stuff. And, that's just as popular as the big stuff. And it's usually those people who create their own brands and sell their own clothes, sell their own boards and make films of what they do. And a lot of people are drawn to that as well. I feel like there's a bit of a fear that if breaking becomes just completely turned into a commodity or completely commercialized, then we'll lose our roots. We'll lose the essence of hip hop and the essence of, the individual within it. I think that there's space to have both. And with the right leaders and people playing in those big roles of the corporate side or the, big competition side. So, keeping it within breakers, for example, having organizations that are run by breakers, or at least having breakers part of the decision-making committee of whatever happens with the dance, then I think we can still keep its essence. But, it's just about what we do from now until 2024, it's really fragile. So we just have to make the right moves.
Which it's obviously very exciting times, no matter which way you look at the sport, with that Olympic appearance. LA's confirmed it for 2028 as well, which I'm sure Brisbane will, want to keep their two-time Olympic gold medalist Kid Tek on a home Olympics in 2032 there, Gerard. So I'm sure it'll only be a matter of time before it's there. But, I mean, it's just going back to the question when I asked about growing up, watching the Olympics, things like that. But it just must be an insane thing to think that this art form that you got involved in, now you have this opportunity to go to an Olympic Games, which when you started, you would probably never thought in your wildest dreams would be. I think it'd be like if all of a sudden they said at the Brisbane Olympics, podcasting was an Olympic sport. Like, fuck, I could be an Olympian. Great, this is going to work out for me. But I mean, how does that affect your mindset now when you kind of look at the sport? Is the Olympics something now that you're like, wow, this is where I want to be. I want to be in Paris. And does that change much kind of in that process and that lead up to the Olympics?
Well, I guess it's important, Like I said before, I was coming from a hiatus. And part of why I put a lot more effort into breaking coming out of that was because of the mindset that, well, this is going to be big in a couple of years. I want to get to a level where I can be a part of whatever happens, whatever comes with the Olympics, whether that's me being in the Olympics or me just reaping the benefits of the breaking scene being elevated as a whole. So it does come into play with how hard I practice. But I guess for me personally, the Olympics, the way that I like to see it is, on a personal level, it's not, the pinnacle of breaking. Because I do appreciate and I do value that art form aspect a lot. And if I have to sacrifice that to be an Olympian, then, I'll have to consider that. But I don't think that's necessarily where I want to be. I still want to be able to break how I want to break and do good. I don't want to have to change who I am to please Olympic judges or a specific judging system. But, I'm still going to give it my best shot. I'm still going to try to do my best as me. And I think that's like, that's all I can really do.
Great attitude to have with that. And obviously, I can imagine that's very important for pretty much any breaker out there who's sort of, been involved in it for a long time. I was sort of reading around the qualifying, and sort of it seems a little bit sort of structured but up in the air. So I'm not sure sort of how much you're aware of the qualification, but it seems like Australia, the Oceanic Championships, kind of that's how it's going to play through. So for yourself, is it a case of you look ahead and go to a World Championships, Oceanic Championships, and just see what kind of, as you're going on there, flows upon and comes upon your way that could lead to that Olympic appearance?
Yeah, well, I think now what's coming into play within the Breaking Association that we have are more opportunities to go international and compete against the world, as opposed to just compete against Australians. So like you said, we are categorized within this oceanic subcategory within the world. And that, I think, has a bunch of countries that are really high level breakers, or have breakers who have a really high chance of even winning the Olympics, And I hate to say it, but Australia is, a small country, and we're very distant from the rest of the world. So when these people in Asia are competing against themselves, so you have Asia, Korea, China, Japan, Hong Kong, all kind of battling each other. And then you have Europe, which has, all these countries who are battling each other. That's kind of where the pinnacle of breaking is. And if I'm in Australia, for me to just go to one of those countries, I have to save up for ages and then go for like a couple of weeks, come back, save up for like another year, then go again, come back. So that's always been a big issue with why, Australia has never been seen as the best country in the world. Because it's, in my opinion, we don't have as much access to world level competitions. But with what you were saying before, because of the Olympics coming around, we are. So there are programs in play now that allow us to fly to some of these countries for free or with some assistance, so that we have more opportunities of going there and actually getting that experience that we need.
And in terms of Oceania, tell me one thing though, Gerard. Are we better than New Zealand? Like, do we have to worry about the Kiwis, or we've got them covered?
Not at all, man.
They're fine.
Disregard them.
Yeah, no, we often do. That's kind of just generally the Australian way with that. It's just such an exciting period for breaking and just kind of moving forward with it. And so glad that we're being able to sort of get you on here to kind of to learn about this, because I remember when it was announced, it's just kind of that sort of thing like, oh yeah, okay, breaking, that's an interesting one. And as said to you in this interview off air, this is just going to just take off. I cannot see this not being the biggest breakout star of Paris and moving forward. And obviously LA are seeing enough in it that they've included that in the Olympics in 2028. I don't doubt Brisbane will in 2032, but it's just huge times. And is it something that if people are listening, watching this, they want to get involved in breaking, Gerard? Like, obviously the National Federation now exists, but local clubs, things like that, they're obviously probably popping up, I can imagine, a little bit more frequently now.
Yeah, take my class.
Yeah.
Every week. So that's
plug it. Where can they go? Let them get the class. Come on, get some students out there.
Crossover dance in the city. So in Sydney, around Chinatown, there's a dance studio called Crossover. I teach there. I'm also open to private classes. You can at me on Instagram, Tek the Kid. That's where that's just where I'm at. You can hit me up there. But another big thing for me is classes is one thing, but there's also just open training spots. I learned breaking for free, so I think everyone can learn breaking for free. Rock up to a training spot, practice there, ask people for tips. Don't be annoying, but just, observe as much as you talk. And learn there. But there are many practice spots, many sessions. I also run a weekly session in Burwood Monday nights, so that's available. There are training sessions every Sunday at a place called DMC, which is a warehouse ran by Series of Events Australia. There's a whole bunch of training spots out there for people to get better, and a whole bunch of classes in Sydney especially. So it's there. You just have to ask, and it'll be around.
Yeah, and as I keep saying, it's going to take off. You're going to have so many people. Your classes are going to go off now after this interview. I'm telling you now. You're just going to have people lining up. Before I let you go, Gerard, one thing I just wanted to quickly ask you. I love this post that I found on Instagram, a little bit of a bio on you, and I love this section here where it mentions that you do not enjoy birds, swimming, and peanuts, and that you have almost died from all three. I feel is there a story to this, or is it just a case of just avoid all of them because I'm allergic to them all?
Oh, well, I hate birds. I'm afraid of birds. When I was young, my dad's a cameraman, so we were taking photos of birds, and we were getting close to this baby duck, and then the mother duck just came around the corner and just started chasing us. And ever since then, I was like, fucking, I've been afraid of birds. Swimming, I can't swim. I almost drowned recently in like a shallow rock pool. It was just so embarrassing. So I was, it was like you're walking on rocks, right? So it's unpredictable. And sometimes the rock is lower than the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I kind of misstepped and I fell in, and I was treading water, and I can only tread for 10 seconds. So after those 10 seconds were up, I was just fucking sinking. And I was like, I think I'm going to die. And my last thing that I thought about was, there are people here who are like near me. Let me turn around so they don't see my face as I die. Because it's so embarrassing what's happening right now. Jeez. And just in that moment, I kind of put my foot on the right spot and then got up.
Wow.
And yeah, I'm anaphylactic, so I'm allergic to peanuts. So,
So basically, don't go on a picnic near a lake and bring peanuts, basically near the birds or things like that. I mean, unless your breaking enemies are listening and go, fuck that guy, I just can't beat him. I'm just gonna, hey Gerard, you wanna go picnic down near the duck lake? I've got some peanuts.
Man, that's I have enemies out there, man. We don't want to be talking about this.
Exactly. Gee, I'm giving them fuel to do it in a battle against you now. Shit, what have I done? Yeah.
Exactly.
I've ruined this for you.
Or something like that,
Yeah, exactly. If they bring this up, blame this interview, and sort of you can hunt me down. Gerard, this is seriously, mate. It's been so much fun learning about this, and I really do wish you all the best of luck moving forward, and we really do hope to see you at the Paris Olympics. And even if you don't make it, just the atmosphere and the vibe and kind of the word I'm trying to think of, not even coming to my head. The momentum. There we go. That's what I'm trying to think of, that this sport will obviously gain, as I keep mentioning 1,000 times. So exciting to learn about the sport, learn about you, and I'm sure we will be seeing a lot of you very soon at the Paris Olympics. I'm putting it now, Gerard. You'll be there.
Yes, sir. Speak it into existence, my friend. It'll happen.